Welcome to The Explainer. We really like to think of ourselves as incredibly logical creatures, especially when the stakes are super high. We just naturally assume our reasoning is completely rock solid. But what if I told you there is an invisible saboteur constantly hijacking your thoughts, manipulating your choices, and literally rewriting your perception of reality without you even realizing it? Well, today we're going to unmask it. So, think about these three massive historical events for a second. In 1996, several highly experienced expedition leaders tragically perished on Mount Everest. Then, in 1999, a NASA Mars climate orbiter was just entirely lost in space. And back in 1983, a massive Air Canada Boeing 767 completely ran out of fuel, 41,000 feet in the air. So, what is the common thread tying these wildly different disasters together? I'll give you a hint. It wasn't mechanical failure, and it definitely wasn't the weather.
Okay, let's dive into this. The answer is shockingly human. Every single one of these events involved highly trained experts making incredibly irrational, sometimes fatal assumptions. I mean, we're talking about professionals who literally wrote the rule books, yet they ended up breaking their own rules. It's this bizarre, almost unbelievable disconnect between immense expertise and absolutely disastrous outcomes that we need to figure out today.
Section 1. The Invisible Saboteur. How Experts Fail. Let's look at the facts. On Mount Everest in '96, seasoned expedition leaders just completely ignored their own strict turnaround times. They fell prey to overconfidence. With the Gimli glider, ground personnel and the flight crew made a totally unchecked assumption about metric versus imperial fuel measurements. That left a commercial flight literally gliding through the sky without engines. And the Mars climate orbiter lost for nearly the exact same reason. Engineers just assumed the other team was using metric units. No way, right? It is mind-boggling that a multi-million-dollar spacecraft burned up over a simple unit conversion error. And then at the Sullivan Mine, 4 trained professionals died in a toxic environment because each one inexplicably discounted the clear fate of the victim right in front of them. The takeaway here, experience doesn't make anyone immune.
Section 2. Defining cognitive bias, the reveal.
The culprit behind all of this is cognitive bias. By definition, this is a systematic pattern of deviation from norm or rationality in judgment. The absolutely crucial word there is systematic, right? This isn't just a random mistake or a fluke. It is a predictable, repeatable error in how we actually process information. It's like a glitch in our mental software. Our brains take an objective reality, run it through a series of fast mental shortcuts, and spit out a highly subjective reality. And it's that subjective reality, not the actual objective truth, that dictates our behavior, leading to all sorts of perceptual distortions and deeply illogical interpretations.
Now, we haven't always known about this flaw in the human operating system. Back in 1972, 2 brilliant psychologists, Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman, noticed something fascinating. They saw that humans are just terrible at reasoning intuitively with large numbers and probabilities. So by 1974, they published a groundbreaking paper mapping out how we heavily rely on mental shortcuts, which they called heuristics. Their work completely upended our entire understanding of human logic. It was a real game changer, so much so that Kahneman eventually won a Nobel Prize for it in 2002. And to really humble us, Kahneman went on to study highly paid, incredibly educated Wall Street experts. And guess what he found? These superstar financial managers performed no better than random chance when picking stocks. Why? Because of what he called the illusion of skill. They were so deeply entrenched in their own cognitive biases that they literally couldn't see the reality of the market. So if Wall Street experts and NASA engineers fall victim to this, yeah, you and I definitely do too.
Section 3. The evolutionary mismatch. The motive. You see, for decades, classical economic theory just assumed we were all rational economic agents, basically calculating machines that meticulously weighed risks to make the perfect, logical choice every single time. But the reality? We are evolutionary humans. Our brains evolved way back in the Paleolithic era. We didn't survive by stopping to do complex math when a tiger jumped out of the bushes, right? We survived by making incredibly fast, highly emotional snap judgments. And this brilliantly illustrates why we process things the way we do. Because of that evolution, we operate on 2 completely distinct systems. System 1 is our ancient, automatic, and highly emotional brain. It's always on, running in the background. System 2 is our modern, deliberate, logical brain. But it requires a massive amount of energy to run, so it's inherently kind of lazy. Because we simply don't have the processing capacity to analyze every single piece of data coming at us, System 2 just defers to System 1's shortcuts. And those shortcuts, well, that's exactly where the biases live. Section 4, the usual suspects, a lineup of biases. Let's look at 5 notorious offenders you probably deal with every day. First up, confirmation bias. This sneaky one makes you seek out information that proves you're right and completely ignore absolutely everything else. Then there's anchoring bias, which literally hooks your brain to the very first piece of information it receives, skewing everything that comes after. The framing effect? That changes your choice based purely on how something is worded. Then we have the availability heuristic, which convinces you that whatever you can remember most easily is automatically the most important thing. And finally, hindsight bias. That annoying little voice whispering, "I knew it all along," after a totally unpredictable event actually happens. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how seamlessly these exact same biases scale up. They go from mundane, everyday behaviors straight up to life or death situations. For example, you might experience confirmation bias by just tuning out a political opponent on TV, but that same blind spot caused the Sullivan mine tragedy. You might anchor onto a bad starting price in a house negotiation, but that same bias caused ground crews to underfuel the Gimli glider. And framing? Oh, patients will happily agree to a surgery if you say it has a 90% success rate. But if you tell them it has a 10% failure rate, they'll panic and refuse the exact same surgery. Our logic is entirely at the mercy of context. Section 5. Rewiring human judgment. Countermeasures? So, how do we fight back? Enter debiasing. This is the structured process of actively reducing bias in our judgments. Because cognitive biases are automatic, you cannot simply think your way out of them. Actually, let me emphasize that. Just knowing about bias is not enough to stop it. We have to build external systems, training methods, and little nudges that practically force our lazy system to wake up and take the wheel. One really powerful external system is Daniel Kahneman's outside view method, also known as reference class forecasting. Say you want to avoid wild over-optimism on a massive new project. Well, don't look inward at your own hopes and dreams, look outward. Step 1, identify past projects similar to yours. Step 2, look at the cold, hard data of how those past projects actually turned out. And finally, Step 3, force your current project's timeline or budget to align with those historical realities. By relying on statistics rather than your gut feelings, you bypass the saboteur entirely. And sometimes, the most effective system is actually the simplest. Look at this number. 0%. This was the result of an absolutely brilliant intervention by Atul Gawande at a major U.S. hospital. See, doctors were suffering from overconfidence and memory bias, and they kept skipping vital steps during central line insertions. So Gawande instituted a super simple 5-step external checklist, and he literally empowered the nurses to step in and stop the doctors if a step was missed. The result? Central line infection rates dropped to an absolute 0. Incredible, right? So the crucial point is, that very same dirt-cheap piece of paper didn't just save 8 lives in a 15-month period, it also saved the hospital $2 million in avoidable costs. $2 million bucks. It is absolute irrefutable proof of the sheer power of external structured interventions to outsmart our own flawed internal logic. And guess what? We can also train our brains directly. Researchers recently had participants play interactive debiasing video games. Yes, video games, to confront their mental blind spots. And the data here is awesome. Immediately after playing the game, commission of cognitive bias dropped by over 30%. But even more amazingly, 2 to 3 months later, those same participants still showed a greater than 20% reduction in bias. A single, engaging training session literally rewired their judgment for months. So, to bring this all together, cognitive biases are really just a byproduct of our processing limitations. We aren't fundamentally broken, and we certainly aren't inherently foolish. We are simply complex beings, operating on ancient hardware with limited processing capacity, trying to navigate a chaotic, data-heavy modern world. But by understanding our limitations, we can build the checklists, the training, and the systems to protect us from ourselves. Which leads us to one final thought to chew on. Next time you are absolutely certain you're making the completely rational choice, whether that's at work, in a tense negotiation, or just in your personal life. Is it really you deciding, or is it your invisible saboteur? Use the tools we've discussed today to make sure you are the one truly in control. Thanks for exploring this with me. Keep questioning your assumptions, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.